Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. Hoping everyone out there is enjoying your weekend. This next storm, I'm starting to get more concerning with it. In fact, if we take a look at the latest radar depiction coming out of the Davenport region or just south of there, we almost have like a little eye that has formed. This is a pretty intense mesoscale convective vortex known as an MCV that is really moving across that region into central Illinois as well as central Indiana. This is really getting its act together. In fact, we actually have a latest mesoscale discussion on it, talking about another 1 to 3 inches, rainfall rates coming in with this region. We could be ended up looking at 4 to 6 inches in some localized totals. So yes, flash flooding is a huge concern as this surface low is going to be swinging across, definitely looking pretty intense on radar and dumping some very heavy rain along with it. So if we kind of expand the view, there is the setup on the U.S. outlook here. But just to the south, we've got another convective complex that's going to be coming across portions of Kansas into the Oklahoma region. And that's going to be the weaker one right now, but an even more intense one that's going to be coming out of the Denver region and going to be swinging across portions of Kansas back into Oklahoma again tonight in the overnight, like in the wee hours of the morning. That's the one I'm really concerned about, because in fact, the latest update from the SPC does in fact include that kind of a hatched risk for those intense winds upwards to over 65 miles an hour. The latest update coming out of the Tulsa region could in fact see wind gusts over 80 miles an hour later on. We're talking after midnight, folks. This is like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So batten down the hatches. Now's the time to prepare for high impact event across these regions. Secure all loose objects, any trampolines, flagpoles, trash cans out there, anything that might be flying projectiles within this region. You need to secure now in anticipation of this higher impact event later on this evening, coming out of the Denver region, back into Dodge City, swinging as far south as the Texas Panhandle into the Amarillo region, into the Oklahoma City region, but especially into Tulsa and Wichita. And those will continue into the wee hours, early morning time frame, extending into the Memphis, Tennessee region. They all originate as very large hail producers just around the Denver Metroplex, heading into eastern portions of Colorado. Those swing down to the Pueblo region, back into Dodge City. Those could be some golf ball to tennis ball size hail reports coming out of this region on top of the intense winds. And to the south of that mesoscale convective vortex, the area is beginning to start showing signs of a little bit more concerning for tornadic activity as well. So also we could be looking at maybe 1, 2, possibly 3 tornadoes that might be coming out of this region later on this afternoon into the evening time frame within this atmosphere. So definitely looks to be kind of a high impact event coming up on top of the flash flooding. Because if we expand the view and look at some of these helicity values and showing where some of these updrafts could be, it's highlighting these same areas, right? Originating in the Denver region, coming across into the Texas Panhandle, swinging into portions of Kansas here, especially headed into the Oklahoma region, and shows that region across central Illinois and southern Indiana. So these are the main areas of concern for big time hail and maybe some isolated spin-ups, especially along these regions in Illinois and Indiana. And look at the storm complexes. So we've got a fairly decent, significant event tonight. And this could really start to, include some bow echoes, bowing features as the winds really kind of elevate. We're probably looking at some significant, wind advisories out here for some 70, 80. I couldn't even, rule out some 90 mile per hour possible severe thunderstorm warnings later on tonight. Because if we look at some of these, the wind layout and some of these maximized wind gusts over the next 24 hours really highlights these separate mesoscale, convective systems, in Kansas here, coming out of Colorado, going down in Oklahoma, and then there's that other feature that will be highlighted over the Memphis region into the early morning time frame That's tomorrow morning, folks. So it's a bumpy night, folks. There's none of it's definitely gonna be a bumpy night because if we look at the radar depiction, this is about 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So this is about 2 o'clock in the morning. We're starting to get these isolated bubblers really starting to bubble up, originating, starting out as a big time hail producer, and then just kind of transforming into more of a squall line. And when it starts to bow out like this, that's why the SBC upped the ante on the wind producers, and they could be looking at expanding it even further because these are taking shape of a pretty significant event in the form of high winds with these, with these complexes of storms. And yet we have more storms. This is going to be another setup coming in for later on tomorrow and then heading into Monday, because we have another fairly decent significant low pressure that's going to be coming across Iowa back into Illinois. And then on the southern flank of there, we've got more storm development, including portions of Missouri. Those get into Kentucky, back into Tennessee, highlighted over the Memphis region. So there's the setup for Sunday. Into Springfield, back into St. Louis again. It's been getting crushed lately with all the heavy rain, flash flooding within that region. Now we're talking some higher wind gusts coming in back into the Paducah region. Some of these areas included a foot of rain and recently with these really training supercell thunderstorms. So these same areas that look to be impacted kind of over and over again because the ridge still is in the same place. And it doesn't want to go anywhere, because if we zoom the view out and look at the 500 millibar, you see all the areas that highlighted in the orange shaded area. That's your ridge, right? And then you got that cooler pocket aloft. So with that cooler pocket aloft, it's able to overturn the atmosphere. And that's why we're showing some of these just relentless setups over and over and over again with these convective complexes coming across. But for the South, it's just still about the heat, folks. This is just nonstop. I know it's supposed to be hot in the summer, and it is hot, but it's just day after day of this, it gets old, right? I mean, I live in Dallas myself, folks. I feel it every day. It's gonna be 107 today. It hadn't rained a drop at my house in over a month. I mean, it just same thing. Everything's dead and it's hot. It's just hot and it's not going to go anywhere. I mean, there's nothing to budge this ridge, as in fact, it actually comes back next week. I mean, it just comes back with a vengeance. So we'll have more complexes in some of the same areas. So here's the setup on Monday. So as we go into next week, there's the setup going into Illinois again. Another fairly bona fide low pressure center will be forming. That'll traverse it across northern portions of Indiana. And then there's the southern flank of that storm development as these will come across. So, and it's all going to be taking advantage of the higher, sea surface anomalies down in the Gulf of Mexico, dragging in that from that southwest wind, dumping in those 70 dew points. The atmosphere is very moist, very sticky, very humid. And the colder pocket aloft is going to overturn the atmosphere. You're going to be wringing it out like a sponge. And that's exactly what's going to happen as these come across. So there's the cold front. Cold, cool, whatever you want to call it in the summertime. It's a boundary. It's a boundary separating wind direction, really. And it's just a tease as the atmosphere tries tries to reach the surface there in the Red River. But it's nothing but, it's pretty big time thunderstorms as we head into, eastern Tennessee, back into western portions of the Carolinas, into Virginia, back into West Virginia. That, this will come up the, East Coast, back into Pennsylvania. New Jersey will get into the action, and it'll kind of wind itself down as we get a little bit further north. That'll be in the daytime on Monday afternoon, heading into early evening. So if we break down the next 3 days, really the main complexes will be really originating from the Dakotas, coming across Iowa, really getting its act together over Illinois and Indiana. And then we'll have that southern flank that originates in the Denver region and then really gets its act together across Kansas into Oklahoma. This is along that little boundary, that cold front, if you will, swinging across Arkansas, going into western Tennessee and back into portions of, Alabama here, into Georgia. Florida stays wet, and then of course the Northeast stays wet. So these areas have been hit hard, continue to remain hard, and these areas that have the ridge and the sinking air and the hotness and the 100-degree heat continue to remain, because there's the ridge going into next week, folks. It comes back even stronger. I mean, it's just, the ridge is the same deal, right? It'll just expand over the same areas, and that puts the storm placement on the northern, east side of the northern ridge of this high pressure, and we'll have another complex. This is going into the middle of next week. So some of the same areas will have more complexes form on the northern side of these, of the ridge, originating in portions of Nebraska. These will come across portions of Missouri, heading into Arkansas again, probably tease the Tulsa region. In fact, I think they already have a day 5 risk out from the SBC, have that slight risk. So this is another area to be concerned about, as this will continue to cross same areas, right? Western, Western Kentucky, Western Tennessee, coming into northern portions of Mississippi. And then there's that complex as we go into Thursday. Might shift a little bit. So the same areas that get a hit today and tomorrow get hit Wednesday and Thursday for next week. As in, we'll have another complex with the ridge coming back, right? We'll have another complex just form on the northeast there, and we'll have to be highlighted and concerned about southern Illinois again, southern Indiana, back into Ohio again, back into western Tennessee, Kentucky, back into western Tennessee, right? As you continue with the heat, further south. One thing that's going to change next week is the high pressure is going to be expanding along the West Coast. So you've been on the above normal side, but you're going to be on more the intense heat side as you really start to elevate those temperatures along the West Coast and along into the Pacific Northwest. You really haven't felt the brunt of summer yet. And I think you will be feeling the brunt of summer, as we get deeper into the middle, into the end of next week up there in the Pacific Northwest. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do be safe this evening in the storm zone. Secure all loose objects now and prepare for those storms in the days to come. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch the next update while I protect you before and after the storm.